As we get going. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first virtual Orlando/Florida Regional Training Forum. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope that you are safe and healthy and enjoying some extra time at home or with your families and projects that may be going on. Certainly these are times that we are having to navigate quite differently, but I'm sure, as I am, learning a lot about how we can reach our associates virtually, but also what we can do as trainers to really kind of bring post-COVID back to as much normal as we can. So I hope today you have the opportunity to learn not only a little bit more about webinar facilitation skills based on the first poll that was up. It was clear about half do webinars now, and certainly we are all attending more virtual meetings nowadays. So just a couple housekeeping items on Zoom, which I'm sure we have all become quite experts on WebEx or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever online platform you are using. But go ahead, and if you have a question, you can take yourself off mute. We'd love to see you on video. Since we're not in person, this will be very, very similar to our in-person RTFs, where we can stop and ask questions. We can have side chats. We'll do some networking here later, and we'll have some chart announcements as well. But our first speaker actually has a second engagement right after our chart. So I want to go ahead and get started and introduce our first speaker. Both of our speakers today are from New Leaf Training and Development. Just pull and our first speaker today is Paul Butler, who is a client partner with New Leaf Training and Development. He is based out of the Los Angeles office, chartered global management accountant, and a chartered management accountant, having qualified with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Prior to starting New Leaf Training and Development in 2005, he served as a regional finance director for Marriott International Hotels and Hilton International Hotels. Paul also served as the director of finance for Hilton Honors. On a personal note, Paul and his wife just celebrated 25 years of marriage, and as a family, they plan to become citizens of the United States this year. Congratulations on that 25 years, and congratulations on becoming citizen.
Oh, thanks, Kim. And I said to my wife, actually, I said, what would you like for your 25th? And she said a divorce. I said I wasn't thinking about spending that much. I'll be here all week, you know. Well, I'm delighted to be working with you today. And if I can make you 3 promises for our time together today, I can't think of any time in history when anyone that's originally from England has ever lied to an American. I mean, that whole 1776 thing was just a mild misunderstanding. But promise number 1, you'll not be bored, because promise number 2 is we're going to make this participative in obviously the limited time that we have together today. I'll be out of here by 11 a.m. Eastern time, but we do want to make this very participative. And the third promise is this is going to be very, very practical. The reason why I'd ask him to share with you a little bit about my background is because just like you, I've had real jobs with real responsibilities, and I'm learning all of the time about how to facilitate, for example, you know, online learning and development, whether it's a short session like this, or whether maybe it's a full day seminar that you're breaking up over, say, 3 90-minute webinars, or a half day seminar that you might be breaking up over 2, say, 75-minute webinars, and all of the different platforms out there. In the limited time that we've got, we'll spend a little bit of time looking at some of the pros and cons, or pluses and minuses really, towards 4 of the main platforms. If I may, just a little bit about our organisation, just to add a little bit of credibility that we can speak with a degree of authority about this superb industry of learning and development. So we have 4 delivery channels, as you can see on the screen. Seminars, which obviously are usually on site, but we can do them online. Keynote addresses, usually for large audiences, one-to-one coaching, usually at a fairly senior level within the organization, again, in person or online. And then online, which we tend to do on-demand e-learning, which our second office out of Florida mainly drives for us. But we also do a lot of client-specific webinars as well. We've now served clients in 28 states since we started just over 14 years ago. And as I just mentioned, we've got a second office over in Florida, which my colleague Mark Griffiths, who's leading the second session, opened about 3.5 years ago. And we've now served clients in China, India, 3 countries in Western Europe, and Australia. So we're very, very grateful for what we've done. And we've got a range of clients. We've now served about 250 clients. About 50% of our clients are large corporates. About 30% of our clients are large educational institutions, both private and public. And then the other 20% is really a mixture between some fairly significant non-profit entities, pretty well-known organizations, and then quite a few government or quasi-government entities as well. So here's a question I've got for you, because again, in the limited time that we've got, I really want this to be a conversation, because if I could be properly selfish for a minute, I learned so much from other people. I learned so much from these sessions from other people, and certainly don't want to come across as any kind of guru or sage on a virtual stage, as it were. And the wisdom is really on the webinar. So here's the poll I've got, is how effective do you find webinars? So I'll just open that up. Here we go. Let's see if we can get 100% participation. On your mark, get set, go. Only 3 answers. You might want to cover up your work, Kim. Make sure no one's copying. Monique's like, good point, good point. If you're not quite sure, take a guess.
It didn't pop.
So we're nearly 100%. We got 92% of people voted. This is much more interesting than your email. Much more interesting. So going, gone. So I'll end the poll and I'll share the results with you. So about 85% of you would say somewhat effective, and I would agree with that actually. I'm sure it wouldn't take a genius to be able to ascertain what are some of the frustrations or challenges with webinars. And I'm hoping in our limited time together today that, if there's 1, 2, 3 things from this session that either one of your colleagues or anything that I say that might add value, then if that can nudge that up from a somewhat effective to a quite effective or very effective, then I think it's a job well done. So before we, let me just close that out of the way for us. So before we, I wondered in the chat box, why did you give it that score? So I'd love to see your thoughts in the chat box. We'll be in and out of that in 60 seconds or so, but just so that we can all see, why would you give it that score? I'll give you about 60 seconds. On you go. I'm not going to comment, obviously, on every single chat that comes through. We can all read them. Make sure you're choosing everyone on the drop down, which is the default on Zoom, but you may have been having a private chat with 1 or 2 individuals earlier. So make sure everybody can see your answers. Yeah, it depends on the facilitator or presenter. Yeah, thanks, Kim. Now, I'm hoping if this goes well, Kim, I can put you down as a reference for our citizenship. Kim's like, well, let's just see how this goes. Yeah, that's a really good point from Tim, isn't it, really, about the body language piece, which is difficult to get in this kind of square box, especially when people have the cameras turned off. I actually flossed this morning. I mean, that's something you don't hear an Englishman say very often. I actually flossed this morning because of the crew. Chris is like, that's a fair point. All right, good stuff. Yeah, I find myself doing other things as the webinar's going along, yeah, me included. If that facilitator doesn't engage me and isn't got a command and control of the tools, or for example, if the audio's dreadful or the visuals are Joe Jr., that stuff could just turn me off and I just find my email or social media a lot more interesting. All right, good stuff. So I'll close that for us. So the way we've organised this is really kind of best practices. And if I could just bold, italicise, underline, we don't hold ourselves out as being the fountain of all knowledge on this. I think really what we've put together is common sense organised, but common sense, of course, is just not that commonly practiced. I'm sure all of us, me and Mark included, have attended some absolutely dreadful webinars. And if anybody does want to copy these slides afterwards, let me know and I'll happily send these over to you, either in Keynote or PowerPoint or PDF. So the first point we wanted to make here is that we recommend webinar lengths of about 45 to 90 minutes. Again, I'm not saying this is like the law of the land, as it were. We've just found from trial and error over the last, 3-4 years now, that if you make the webinar too short, by the time you've done the introductions and the close, there's really no value. About 45 minutes we're finding is about the sweet spot. And if you've done any study on Zoom, again, not saying that Zoom have got it all down, but I think there's a lot of science behind this. They tend to recommend starting a webinar at 15 after the hour and then finishing it at the top of the hour. Apparently they've done a lot of studies on that. And you tend to get people arriving on time. And then there's that inertia to finish at the top of the hour, as they're saying. If you can delight people by being a few minutes before the top of the hour, people then can transition to their next commitment. 90 minutes, of course, is kind of pushing it a little bit. I'm doing an earnings call debrief for a publicly traded company shortly, and they actually do it over 2 hours. And so we have to really engage the participants. And we do North America, and then we do EMEA and APAC, and then we do Latin America, but that's actually a 2-hour webinar. And I have offered my 2 cents on that that's a little bit long, but again, I think we really use some pretty engaging functionality. So that'd be the first thing. Probably stating the obvious, check, move on. Let's have a look at the second one. I'm going to run through the first 10, and then I'm going to ask in the chat box for any comments, thoughts that you would have on these 10, while obviously keeping an eye on the time. The second visual we put here about this loudspeaker is obviously to make sure you're announcing them. Now, those of us on the webinars that might be in an external position where you're pushing out to your network and you're giving them a message, or if you're serving your internal customers and you want to get as many people engaged on the webinar as possible, we'd actually recommend 3, 2, 1. What do you mean? What I mean is try and set the webinar up ideally so that you release 3 or 4 weeks out. So 3 weeks out, short reminder. 2 weeks out, short reminder. 1 week out, short reminder. And then 1 day out. And then you know what happens? We all forget, we all get busy, we all get distracted. We've actually found it's really effective to remind people 1 hour out, and obviously trying to keep those reminders as short and sweet and as engaging as possible. You don't want like 14 paragraphs, you know. Number 3, we found that really these are the 4, for us, we've found these tend to be the 4 best webinar platforms. Obviously you can see the brands up on the screen. I'm sure you're very familiar with them. We'd suggest that we found these are presently, and I do emphasize the word presently, that these are presently the 4 best. I think one of the wonderful things about these platforms is they're always evolving, and who knows what's around the corner in terms of, say, the next Zoom. I think with regard to those 4, just dipping into those briefly, because I'd love to get your thoughts in the chat function. Either as you think about something, drop it into the chat function now, but as I mentioned, when we get through the first 10, we'll open up a chat function. So you might want to just mentally note something you might want to comment on these. Couple of headlines here. What we like about, say, Adobe Connect, for example, is you actually feel like you're in a room. Those of you that use Adobe Connect, you actually feel like you're in a training room. The disadvantage we find with Adobe Connect is it's messy to try and get like all the videos working as neatly and as easy as it is in Zoom. One of the things, for example, that we like about WebEx is some of the functionalities around the polls and the chats, which we think are a little bit sharper. We do obviously very much like Zoom, and we were using Zoom as an internal tool prior to obviously using it as a webinar tool. I'm sure all of us have had experience on Zoom and find some of the functionality really good. I like the record capability within Zoom, the same as in the other ones, but I like the way the file kind of neatly wraps up for Zoom. And again, we've just found that the audio and the visual quality of the Zoom recordings are just superb. I'm not just going to ramble on there because I'd like to just kind of park that point. And if you've got any pros and cons about those platforms, any top tips that you've found, any annoying features, I'd love to get your thoughts in the chat function as well. On to number 5, and that's what we'd say here would be really think about how you want to manage audio. I'm sure all of us have had experience of going onto webinars where the audio has been dreadfully managed. And what I mean by that specifically, of course, is, oh yeah, let's just open up the lines. Well, as cool as that sounds, as democratic as that sounds, we've all had experience, haven't we, of like the barking German Shepherd, you know, the crying baby, the lawnmower that's outside, the person that's driving at the same time as the webinar, the person that's in the coffee shop. Do you remember that back in the day when we used to go to coffee shops? Those were the days. And so I think it's very admirable, whoever the host is, for example, today, Kim and Susan, to manage the audio accordingly. Yes, we want to hear people's voice, but you can hear that voice through polls and chats or opening up lines on a selective basis. So really think through about how you want to manage the audio. You really have a duty as the host to think these things in advance and not just think, oh yeah, we'll just go with the flow and just open it all up, you know. Again, I'm sure we've all had some experiences of some dreadful webinars where the audio has not been managed very well. Number 6, I'd really encourage you to think about how sometimes that silence is still golden. So there's really 2 points I'm making there. One kind of links back to what we just said about number 5, but it's also rather like when we do on-site training and development, don't feel that as the facilitator, you have to just like fill all of the silence. I mean, there's nothing worse is there in an on-site training than someone just talking at you. I feel dreadful now because I sound like I'm doing that. But don't be afraid of silence. In other words, pausing to give people time to respond to the chat. Don't feel like you have to comment on every single chat. And the same with the polling. You know, if you've got a fairly complicated poll, like for example, the ones we're doing this morning for that earnings call debrief, it's where we're obviously debriefing the earnings call through the lens of what we call business financial intelligence. And there's some rather technical questions on there. So it's really important to give people like a few seconds to think about the question and not feel kind of rushed. So really think about how you're going to use silence in a webinar to engage the participant. That's one way of them having a voice. They might not be verbalizing anything, but it's for them to think through and they feel that they're engaged rather than you just like yammering on and kind of talking at them. Number 7, we didn't do this today, but we'd highly recommend thinking about a countdown. For example, we have a 10-minute countdown for each of our webinars, and we actually have the music muted on there. So you can see, for example, this is just running now. And what we found is people love the idea that you're giving them a message that, gosh, you're going to run this thing on time. You're going to start on time and you're going to finish on time. And by using, say, a timer before the start of the webinar, when people are coming in, hello, how you doing, and all that type of stuff, just to have a nice silent countdown can be very, very powerful. Obviously, you can get some of these tools online. If anybody wants the ones that we've created, let us know and we'll happily share those with you. I think we've got some really nice inspiring quotes, some really kind of cool images, and we've just found it really centers people and focuses people, calms people, and it gives a very powerful message that you're going to start the webinar on time. So nearly done, and then I'd love to hear your voice, as it were, because again, we're all learning from each other. Number 8, what we'd recommend, and you saw Kim and Susan to some extent do this morning. In other words, say, hey, we're going to start in 5 minutes. Hey, we're going to be starting 3 minutes. Hey, we're going to start in 1 minute. And again, that's really powerful if that's been verbalized along with the countdown, because it gives, of course, really powerful messages to your audience that, you know what, this is actually going to be a webinar that's different. We're going to start on time. And I've got like a couple of minutes. I can do a lot in 2 or 3 minutes, get myself a coffee, get some water, run to the restroom. Gosh, this is going to be a pretty engaging activity. Of course, it says a lot about respect as well, that you're respecting people's time. It's such a precious commodity. Always, always, always start on time. As Kim mentioned, I'm on the West Coast. And of course, time there is a rather dubious, ambiguous subjects sometimes. But we've found that you can really differentiate yourself either as an external or as an internal if you always make sure that you start on time. One way to look at this, we often say, and I will reflect upon this in number 11, is that 1 minute late on a webinar is like starting a seminar 10 minutes late. I mean, how annoying is it when you turn up for a seminar? You know, you fought through the commute. Do you remember those days when we used to commute? And you're there, you're ready to go. And they go, oh, we're just going to hang on for a few more people. And you're like 15 minutes late or something, or 10 minutes late. And it sends a very negative message at the start of the webinar. Number 10, the reason why we brought this image up here is really have 3 to 5 clear objectives. Now, again, because of the platform that we were doing today, because of the conversation we were having today, I didn't necessarily share in advance. Obviously, you know, these are our 3, 4, 5 clear objectives, but you know this as experienced trainers, that probably 3 to 5 clear objectives at the start of your session, calling those out and obviously reflecting back on them towards the end of the session. Can you believe it? My light has gone out because I'm in California and they're so environmentally conscious. If there's no movement in the office for 30 minutes, the lights go out. I'll turn those back on, but it's perfect timing because guess what? Do you have any kind of questions or comments or suggestions? Because we're all learning from each other on 1 through 10. So I'd love to see your thoughts in the chat function. I won't comment on every single comment, keeping an eye on the time, but we can all learn from each other. So I'll see you in about 30, 45 seconds. On you go. Again, thanks for your participation here. There's nothing worse than just somebody just talking and talking as if they're the fountain of all knowledge, because we're certainly not, you know. Oh, some great comments coming through here. I think we'll be finishing early, Tim. They're clearly a talented bunch. Well, do you think 1 or 2 of you need to stay late? Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating, isn't it, Tim, about people, especially if you've got senior leaders that need to be there. Yeah, question there from Mario about number 7. Number 7 was about the benefits of using a countdown. You know, have like a 5-minute or a 10-minute countdown, rather like we do often in on-site seminars. And again, you can get some okay ones online for free. You can purchase some a little bit more expensive. If you want ours or have a look at ours, let me know. In fact, I'll put my email, it does come up at the end, but I'll put it in here if anybody wants to email me, and you can have those and delete them if you don't like them. But I think they're pretty cool. Just got some inspirational quotes and some really powerful images. Yeah, that's a really good point again there from Mario, isn't it? Is rather like on-site training, it can be quite exhausting if you're doing all of the talking. And I've noticed that mediocre trainers, mediocre facilitators, they just feel absolutely exhausted at the end of the session. But I've found, and we're always learning about this, that really effective trainers, really effective facilitators, they're actually energized at the end of the session. Why? Because they've really orchestrated a conversation. Yes, they need to have an opinion. Yes, they need to have some authority. Yes, there might need to be a subject matter expert. But of course, it's draining if you're playing the teacher. And I'm sure all of us have got experiences that in school, for example, that some of the best teachers really drew out the learning. Yeah, good stuff. All right, excellent. So I'll just close that down. All right, let's have a look at number 11 then. So let's just take the next 10 in the similar fashion. My goal is we'll be done on these in probably about 10 or 12 minutes. And then towards the end then we'll look at the differences between seminars and webinars and the similarities between seminars and webinars, because there are a lot of similarities and of course we all know the differences. So number 11 let's have a look at this. Already made this point really, that 1 minute on the webinar is like 15 minutes on the seminar. I was commenting it earlier on in the context of being late, but here I'm also amplifying here in your instructional design. So I'm sure all of us have had experience, or will have experience coming up fairly soon, where we're taking, say, an on-site curriculum and we're putting that into an online format. Generally speaking, what we've found is what takes about 15 minutes to do in an on-site, in-person seminar setting, you can really do it in about a minute or two within a webinar platform. Obviously, you have to look at the different instructional design methodologies. But again, what we're finding is, you know, a half-day curriculum, you know, think about a half day. Say if you did something like from 9 till 1, it's 4 hours. Take off maybe 10 minutes for break. You're down at 230 minutes. 230 minutes, what we've found, you can actually distill that really neatly into about 2 75-minute webinars with maybe a 10-minute break in the middle. If you've got a full day program, which of course, let's say it's an 8-hour program, by the time you take off the afternoon break, the morning break, and let's say an hour's lunch, you're really down at about 400 minutes of learning. Well, guess what? We've found that you can actually break that up into about 3 90-minute webinars. Why? Because you can change a lot of the instructional design. And again, what we found on a 3 90-minute webinars is you ideally want to, if you're going to do them on the same day, make sure there's a break, obviously, between each of the 3 webinars, maybe having a lunch break between the second and the third webinar. Obviously, if the client or your internal customer wants to do it over different days, that makes that a lot more digestible for people. Number 12, as cool as it is for us to be able to all see each other, especially in these days of COVID, where we're really missing the human interaction, really think very carefully about how you want to manage video. Rather like us speaking about managing the audio, think about how you want to manage the video. So for example, if you're going to be co-facilitating or co-hosting with a couple of people, a bit like we did this morning, we got on half an hour early, and maybe it's not a good idea for me to have like the Starship Enterprise up for an hour and a half, because that might be funny for the first 5 minutes, but maybe not for 2 hours. You know, thinking about your background, you know, what are you wearing, you know, all those types of things. And, you know, either as the host, the facilitator, or if you're co-hosting, just having a high courage with high consideration conversation around, you know, what could we change that background. Obviously, if you've got a participant, like I had a participant last week on the webinar who was literally just picking his nose all the way through the webinar, and I was like, dude, that's like gross. So I actually turned his video off. We had another person that was having a full-on argument with his wife in the kitchen, and didn't seem to have enough self-awareness to think about muting themselves. And had another couple where they're actually having an argument on the screen while the guy's on the webinar, and so obviously just turn their camera off. So rather like how you would when you're facilitating a live session, an on-site in-person session, you know, you have the explicit formal authority to manage the video, just as obviously you need to manage the audio in terms of what people are saying. You know, if somebody says something out of order in an on-site in-person session, you have to be able to deal with that without becoming overall teachery. Number 13, really think very carefully about the polls that you're going to use, but make them meaningful. I mean, how many of us, by a virtual show of hands, have been on sessions where it's like, what's your favorite color? Nobody cares. You know, what's your favorite animal? Well, I mean, I understand at the moment that we're all yearning that lack of human connection. But I think when we're beyond these days, and hopefully, God willing, there's the end to this is going to come up fairly soon. Let's make sure if we're doing online learning that we make sure the polls actually have a point and they're not just a frivolous waste of time. Because talking about instructional design, my observation is you could probably cut out 30% of most webinars because they use polls which are absolutely meaningless. I mean, no offense, but I don't really care what your favorite color is. Likewise on that one as well, use chat, but use it purposefully. You know, it's like, let's have a chat. Should we just waste 3 minutes talking about absolute nonsense? Forgive me, I don't want to repeat what I said in number 13, but I think you have a duty as the authority in the room, not that you're the fountain of all knowledge, but people look at you as the orchestrator of a conversation. Let's make sure that we're going to be having chats that have purpose, that we have polls that have purpose. And hopefully so far you've seen that coming through from us. Again, completely understand at the moment we're all yearning that human interaction. On number 15, really powerful, of course, and you guys know this as experienced trainers when you're doing on-site sessions, about calling people out by name. I'm no psychologist, I'm a recovering accountant, but what I've learned about human behaviour is people's favourite word is actually their own name. And I still remember that as a kid at school in England, you know, growing up, that I loved it when the teacher called my name, especially if it was a good thing. Especially if I wasn't being naughty, which when I went into high school, my mother was a high school teacher at my high school. So I managed to get away with everything. That's why I'm so cheeky. But my point being is that people love to be able to hear their names. So, you know, for example, today, I don't do it in a calculated, manipulative way. I just do it because it's really in my heart that I really am interested in people. So I'll say, hey, Kim or Susan or Mario or Chris, or really good point there from Tim. So it's a natural thing. But what I found as an engagement technique, if you want to say that, although I don't see it as a technique, I think it's just a love of people, that it's a great way of drawing people in. Number 16, as cheesy as it is, as corny as it is, you know, to be able to do, for example, you know, high five, spot on, you know, when you've asked a question and you've had really good response, or, you know, virtual fist bumps, you know, don't leave me hanging. I've just found that if I've learnt anything about human behavior, they say the fastest way to the brain is through the heart. So if you can make someone feel something, they're going to think something, or think something differently. And if they think something differently, they're likely to do something differently. The principle underneath that, of course, is that as a person thinks, so are they. So in other words, if we can get someone to think something, they're likely to do something different. And the way sometimes to reach into people is through their heart. And one of those aspects, of course, can be humor. So, you know, using things like virtual high fives, you know, virtual fist bumps, as unprofessional as you think it might sound, forgive me for mentioning it for a third time, but if you could be a fly on the wall for this earnings call debrief, I'm going to be doing with a very conservative, they're actually the world's second largest insurance company. And as I mentioned, they do these earnings call debriefs every quarter through the lens of business financial intelligence, this program that we have. You know, we'll use some of these things and they love it. And they've had us now for, I think this is probably our 8th year doing these, and we do them all over the world for them. So, yeah, so it can be a little bit cheesy, but virtual high fives, fist bumps, hugs, chest bumps, virtual chest bumps can be fun, you know. Number 17, the point I'd like to make there is to use video wisely. I'm sure we've all had experience of, on webinars, of either the video not working because the person didn't test it in advance, or the video being too long, or the video just being inappropriate, where it's just like, you know, maybe a comedic point they were trying to get across and it just fell flat with that particular audience. So really thinking very wisely about the webinar, the video that you're going to use. We very rarely use video on webinars, but if we do, we make sure it runs well. We make sure it's short and sweet. We recommend on a webinar that your video not be any longer than about 60 seconds. You can probably get away with 3 or 4 minutes in an on-site session. Again, interesting, isn't it? That ratio of about 1:4 or 1:5 because of the attention span. And obviously, if we are going to use video, we always look at this like 360. What do I mean by 360? I mean, in terms of, you know, would this video be offensive? You know, is it diverse enough? Are the examples relevant to the particular client? If you're serving an external client, would it resonate with their industry? And obviously, would that talk to your internal customer? Number 18, really watch the time carefully. It's very easy, I've found, with mediocre webinar facilitators because they get very excited by people getting engaged with them and chats and polls, that before you know it, you're like 15 minutes behind schedule. Notice there, Kim, that I said schedule, not schedule. that one might come up on the citizenship test, a few baseball questions and I'll be in, you know. So really watch your time carefully. And again, I've found it's very powerful to actually be intentional. So do you remember me saying, for example, you know, my plan is to get finished at such and such time? Again, it's interesting, rather like how Stephen Covey speaks about in the 7 Habits, you know, habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. In other words, think through where you want to be at certain points in time. Number 19, obviously come back to those objectives, rather like in an on-site seminar session. People love closure. It's like a story, isn't it? Once upon a time, and then this happened. This is how we overcome, and then let's wrap it up neatly at the end. So you'll find you'll get raving fans on your webinars if you actually then review the objectives that you said you were going to do at the start of the session, rather than like, oh, we're 10 minutes late, let's miss the last slides, see you later, have a good day. And it's like, what? And then number 20, again, keep calm and finish on time. We have this internal joke at New Leaf that rather like that Russian gymnast, you know, when you're watching the Olympics. Do you remember that when we used to do like stuff on the TV, sports and stuff? And they land on the perfect 10, you know, and like we always endeavor to like finish like literally right on that minute or within a couple of minutes of when we said we were going to finish. So keep calm and finish on time. Winston Churchill said, they always said, if you're not sure who said a quote, say Winston Churchill or Mark Twain. And but Winston Churchill said, never, ever, ever apologize. Now, I can see why you would say that. I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but I think there's nothing worse is that when you have an on-site session or an online session where people are saying things like, well, you know, we're about 20 minutes behind and I'm going to have to miss these slides out. We were really rushed and I know we're scrambling for time. I mean, all those just dilute my confidence in your ability as a facilitator. So if you do find that you have to kind of gallop ahead a little bit, nobody needs to know that. You don't need to apologize for that. So keep calm and finish on time. So over to you, the wisdoms on the webinar. Any thoughts, if you haven't already put them in the chat function, about anything on 11 through 20? I'll give you about 60 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Good stuff. I just stopped my video there, Kim, because I was just picking my nose. Kim's like, TMI. All right, good stuff. And again, just in the interest of time, not going to read through each of those. I'm sure we can all have a quick glance at there. Yeah, really good question there from Tim about how do you keep from speaking too quickly. I find myself going quicker than when I do a dry run. Again, if anyone's got any suggestions for Tim there, drop it in there. What I found, Tim, is to actually have yourself a timed outline in advance. Some facilitators will actually type their whole script out so they know exactly that it's going to fit on time. The only danger of that, of course, is it can sound like you're reading a script. If you're very natural when you're reading that script, that's cool. And that can help keep you on time. What I tend to do, if you could see on my desk at the moment, so I've kind of got like a timed outline and I know, rather like that Russian gymnast, where I need to be at certain times so I can relax in the gaps because I know where I'm going to land at a certain point in time. Hopefully that's of use for you, Tim. Beautiful. All right, good stuff. Let's crack on then. Again, if you see any comments in there that you want to respond to, again, we're all learning from each other, you know, all learning from each other. All right, so what I'm going to suggest, if I may, is let's move on to the home stretch, which is how is a webinar the same as on-site delivery? So we've got these little two icons that we use, left-hand side online, right-hand side being seminars. So top right-hand corner, little chat bubble there. So how would you say they're the same? Love to get your thoughts in the chat function. I'll let that open for about 60 seconds. Kim, I can feel another itch coming on, so I'm going to turn my video off while I pick my nose again. Kim's like, you got a little something there. We can have some fun. We're on a webinar and life's too short not to have a little bit of fun, you know. Yeah, great offer there from Mark, by the way. We're blessed with enough work. We're not trying to sell anything, but if anybody would like to see an example of a facilitation guide or three of the programs that we've created over the years and how we've then translated them into webinar platforms, happy to put a watermark through those on High Trust and share that with you. And Mark's put his email address in there as well. Thanks, Mario. Good point. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. Yeah, good point there as well from Rachel. Is that about tone and body language are important in both scenarios? I personally prefer to have my video camera on to facilitate as much as I can. I think part of it is, again, that yearning for human contact at the moment, but it's also because I feel like I can elevate or I can engage by using, I tend to find I'm more conscious of my tone and my body language when I've got my video camera on. All right, good stuff. So you'll never guess what we're going to do now. Shock, horror, knock me down with a feather. That's a phrase I'm trying to get going in America. I'm so shocked you can knock me down with a feather. Guess what? We're going to ask about how are they different. So we've alluded to some of these already. Where would you say if you were counseling someone and you were saying, let me just help educate you on how webinars are different to seminars, how would you explain that to someone? What would be your 2 or 3 points? I'll go quiet for about 60 seconds. Susan's like, could you go quiet for about 3 minutes? I'm sick of your accent. Chrissy's like, I haven't understood a word he said yet. Could he have subtitles? I'll tell you what, if there wasn't bills to pay and kids to put through college, I would do training and development for nothing. I just love what we do. I think we've got such a vitally important role, you know, that can really help people. And I'm sure you feel the same, you know. I just don't feel like what we do is work. I just love it, you know. Oh, thanks, Tim. Can I put your granddaughter down as a reference? Yeah, it can be harder to keep participants focused. Thanks, Stacey. And I think some of those tools that we spoke about can really help with that. And again, being very comfortable with the platform and understand the different functionalities can help keep participants focused. We had a great compliment actually from one of our clients a couple of days ago, which I won't name, it would be inappropriate, but basically they said was, you know, do you guys teach webinar facilitation skills? And the entrepreneur in me was like, yes, of course we do. I mean, we do it at the moment as this type of conversation, but I'm sure we could put it together in a package for a client to teach some of their internal trainers. Yeah, really good point there from Kate. Did you see that as well about less immediate feedback due to the nature of the technology? Yeah. And Craig says they're harder for the presenter to feed off the people. I'm sure all of us, our gregarious, extrovert nature as trainers, we get our energy, don't we, from the people that are in the room with us. And it can be difficult. You can feel a little bit isolated on a webinar platform if you don't use, for example, some of those tools that we spoke about. I certainly found, and Mark wouldn't mind me saying this, that when we very first started doing webinars, it was just like a desert. It was just like dry, you know, not from our delivery. We did our very best, but because we weren't masters of some of the technology now and the different platforms, we were really finding our way through it. And we're always learning, but we've definitely found by really understanding the material, the objectives, using some of those techniques that we've mentioned, which really comes from the heart. It's not just a calculated technique. It's just really the way we are that you tend to get better engagement from people. All right, good stuff. So we're right where we need to be time-wise. And really, just to kind of summarize, I really hope that was useful for you. I hope it was kind of common sense, organized. Again, if anyone would like a copy of the slides, more than happy to send these over to you. I think we've made another couple of offers there. And again, I know we don't know each other at all, but again, we're blessed with enough work. We're not trying to sell anything. We're happy to kind of give back to our trade, as it were. If those webinar countdowns can be of any use to you, let me know and I'll put them in the Dropbox for you. Mark's mentioned if you want to have a look at kind of looking under the hood, as it were, at some of the instructional design that we've created, if that's of any use for you. If there's 1, 2, 3 things in there that can add value, then happy to do that. And again, that was us. Mark's going to be doing the second session, and I'm going to hand back to Kim shortly for, because I think she's going to lead you into a break. Obviously, if we can be of any service to you, let me know. And there's my details up on the screen there. I think I need to change my photograph, Mark. That must be about 8 or 9 years ago. My wife likes that one though, Kim. She says that if she squints, she thinks I look like a young Tom Cruise. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, maybe from the back. Like if I was on like a really fast horse. But there's my email address there, and you can get me on Twitter, and obviously I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I'm just hoping, for the sake of like, what was that, about 45 minutes again, I hope it was useful. And I'm thinking if there's 1, 2, 3 things in there that were valuable for you, then I think it would be time well invested. Hope to see you again, and I hope this was really useful for you. And if I could just, while we're wrapping up, I'm just going to put a closing poll up on the screen, which would be, was this useful? And if you say no, not really, we'll just delete that anyway. And if I may, Kim, over to you.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say thank you once again, Paul. I know as we're all kind of navigating our new training in this time period, certainly we have many takeaways from a successful webinar, so that we can kind of work through those things, and your resources I think were wonderful too. So I appreciate you offering those to our group that's here today.
Thanks, Kim. I'll stop sharing that screen now, Kim, so you can lead people into where we're going to be going next. I'll take that off the screen. We're virtually at 100% on the poll, so I'll just give that a few more seconds, and I'll just close that down. I'll share the results with you. I'll tell you what, Kim, that's got to be citizenship application worthy.
Add it on there.
Because the person that said somewhat's probably Mark. It's probably Mark. Over to you, Kim. I'll just hang.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us so early on your coast as well.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys, and I hope to see you again. I wish you all the very best, and keep doing good stuff. Like I said before, I just love this industry, training and development. I think it's a double win if you're also working within the leisure and hospitality industry. Notice that I said leisure, not leisure. And as you know, I was in the industry for about 20 years and love what we do now for the last 14 years. So again, and we just love being in the States. So be nice to Mark as well. Be nice to Mark.